Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT, thrivemarket.com/TCAT. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 372 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very, very well.
Yeah.
You and I have a boatload of stuff out right now. On Saturday night, we published a brand new Patreon episode.
Yeah, we did.
On Christine Rausch. And this was a woman who was given up by her birth mother.
Yeah.
When she was very young. Extended family took her in, gave her a great life. She reconnected with her birth mother years later and then ended up killing her.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that went into it. It's kind of a very strange story.
Definitely some troubling details.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on True Crime All the Time Unsolved, we have an episode out on Adam Emery. Emery was convicted of second-degree murder for stabbing a young man, but he and his wife fled the day he was convicted. His wife's remains were found months later, but Adam Emery is still considered a fugitive from justice. So a little strange that we're talking about the unsolved disappearance of a murderer.
Doesn't happen all that often.
No, it really doesn't. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Jessica Staples.
Hey, Jessica.
Tony Hunt.
What's going on, Tony?
Ray B jumped out at our highest level.
Hey, Ray.
Art Bellin.
What's going on, Bellin?
Nicole Shepard.
Hey, there's Nicole.
Jason Lunsman.
Oh, I appreciate that, Lunsman.
Ducky Laird.
Hey, Ducky.
Cornelia Gustafson.
Gustafson.
Johanna Berglund jumped out at our highest level.
What's going on, Berglund? And appreciate that.
Lucy.
Hey, Lucy.
Taylor Hudson.
Well, appreciate that, Taylor.
Mike Abbott.
Hey, Mike.
Mac McCanda.
Hey, Mac.
And last but not least, Beth.
Hey, appreciate that, Beth.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Jody Eubank.
Well, thank you so much, Jody.
Yep, appreciate all the Patreon support. And then we had a great PayPal donation from Charlene Brewer.
Hey, thanks, Charlene. You know, when you said Tony's name, I wanted to be like George, that, on Seinfeld and Tony. And that Tony guy, remember that Tony guy? Hey, Tony. You don't remember that guy?
No.
It wasn't Tony, was it?
Probably not. Oh, I love your stories, man. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time?
I'm ready.
We are talking about Steven Todd Jenkins. Jenkins was convicted of murdering two bankers who seized his family's farm after his parents filed for bankruptcy. Steven cast the blame on his father, but prosecutors argued that Steven, who was a skilled marksman and obsessed with weapons was the shooter. From 1977 to 1980, James and Darlene Jenkins lived on a 10-acre dairy farm in Ruthven, Minnesota, with their son, Steven. James Jenkins grew up on farms, and farming was the career he was most passionate about. He was described as a quiet loner. One local sheriff said he was a likable sort and didn't cause trouble. The sheriff noted that James paid some of his bills late, but this was not uncommon in the agricultural community because of the unstable income.
Yeah, I think it was kind of the norm.
Well, let's face it, it's not like the job that you have. You know for a fact that every 2 weeks you're going to be paid X amount.
Exactly.
Now, that amount might not be as much as you would like it to be.
But I know what it's going to be.
It might be more than you're actually worth, but you know what it's going to be.
Right.
It's not the same when you're a farmer.
No.
You don't know what the yield's going to be. You don't know what the price for the crop is going to be. So, I mean, there are a lot of variables. Before they purchased the farm in Ruthven, the Jenkins family moved from farm to farm. James once tried to start an earth moving business. His friend Bernard Knuth said he purchased machinery but didn't get much business. James's father co-signed on the loan and had to mortgage his house to help his son.
Well, that's a good dad.
It's a good dad. And I get trying to start a business. Now, it can be risky. If you go out and you buy some of this very expensive machinery and the work doesn't come your way, it's going to go south in a hurry.
Yeah, those bills are still coming in.
Darlene Jenkins told the Minneapolis Star-Tribune that they had to move often because James had trouble keeping a job. One of James's former attorneys told the Star-Tribune that James went through a dramatic personality change after he suffered head injuries in a car accident in his early 20s. Before, he was described as mild-mannered, but after the accident, he was prone to wild fits of temper.
Does that shock you?
You know, at this point, nothing shocks me all that much when it comes to talk of head injuries. I mean, we hear about them so much more nowadays than we ever used to, and we know so much more. And you think about some of the NFL stars who died early. Some of them have donated their brain to science. They've studied those brains. Other people have done it as well. There's no doubt that head injuries can, not always,
right,
but can cause dramatic changes in people. There's just no doubt about it.
Yeah, and we've talked about several of those types of cases over the years.
In 1977, James and Darlene purchased a small farm in Ruthven and 45 dairy cows. They eventually ran into money problems. They didn't have enough pasture to feed the cows, so they had to buy hay and grain. They weren't making enough money and struggled to pay the bills. The cows became malnourished and liens were put on their machinery. Now, I didn't grow up in any type of farm environment.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. There were a lot of farms around where I lived because it was kind of a rural community, but we lived like in a neighborhood. So I never lived on a farm, never had much to do with a farm. I always thought that it would be a very demanding life, but could also be very satisfying. If you think about growing something from the ground up with your own two hands,
right,
seems like that would be satisfying. But how much work, goes in to getting that done? How much work is it to milk 45 cows?
Well, I know you say you wouldn't mind milking some cows.
Just for the practice, or?
Yeah, I know you like to drink that milk right fresh out of that cow.
Or I just want to pull on a teat? Is that what you're trying to say?
Maybe. The fact that you know that's what you do.
Well, for your information, I have milked cows before, so I know how it's done.
Not surprised.
And I know it's called a teat. In the late 70s and early 80s, there was a farm credit crisis in the Midwest due to a recession. This case came to symbolize the rising tensions between farmers and lenders. In 1983, the New York Times reported, with the rise in farm foreclosures, forced farm auctions, and voluntary liquidations in recent months, banks and federal loan agencies have been the target of mounting criticisms and demonstrations, some violent, among a wide range of farm, organized labor, environmental, and anti-nuclear groups, coalescing around the financial plight of farmers and unemployed workers across the Middle West.
It was a pretty big thing too. I mean, I've seen movies, so many movies about that time frame of, the bad bank coming to take the farm away from the family.
Yeah, it's kind of like a movie trope, but it was a real thing. It did happen.
Yeah.
But you could also see why a lot of people would have sympathies for farmers. We need farmers because we have a lot of people to feed here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so to have a bunch of farms go out of business can be kind of catastrophic. In 1979, James and Darlene took on a farm operating loan from the Buffalo Ridge State Bank in Roofton. The following year, they got divorced, defaulted on their loan, and declared bankruptcy. Darlene alleged verbal abuse in her divorce filing. James claimed that Darlene was having an affair with Rudolph Blythe, the president of the Buffalo Ridge State Bank.
Seems a little like a conflict of interest in a strange way.
Yeah, but here's my thought. If you're having an affair with the president of the bank, don't you think you could get an extension on your loan? Or more favorable terms?
You would hope.
You would think so. The Jenkins family soon abandoned the property, and the title transferred back to the bank. According to a news article from Farm Forum, James illegally sold cattle that were meant to be collateral for his loan. He was forced to file for bankruptcy because he was $25,000 in debt.
Yeah, you can't sell something that doesn't belong to you anymore.
Yeah, that's just a good rule of thumb. After the divorce, James briefly worked a trucking job in Ohio before he hitchhiked to Texas. He was hired as a maintenance man by the school district in Brownwood. James eventually saved up enough to buy a camping trailer and an old truck so he could bring Steven to Texas with him. After the divorce, Steven spent his time living with his mom or his paternal grandparents before he moved to Texas to be with his dad. Like his father, Steven was described as a quiet young man. He was also described as hardworking and well-behaved. He was known for always maintaining a military haircut, wearing camouflage, and his interest in weapons.
There's really nothing standing out. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having interest in weapons.
Well, and you're always rocking that short military haircut. You wear fatigues in here a lot. I don't understand it.
Because I'm fatigued.
Because you're tired.
Yeah.
When Steven was a teenager, James bought him a .30 caliber M1 semi-automatic rifle. A coworker who served in Vietnam taught Steven how to use it.
That's a healthy gun.
Yeah, an M1. It's kind of an iconic rifle.
Yeah.
Steven tried to join the Marines in 1981, but he couldn't join because he ruptured his spleen in a bicycle accident the year before. Steven's grandfather said that he was very upset by his parents' divorce. Around that time, his fascination with weapons became more extreme.
Okay, now we're getting into maybe some concern.
Well, yeah, you said there's nothing wrong with, liking weapons or something like that. But when you start to throw around the word obsession, extreme, well, then you're envisioning in your mind, a possible problem.
Yeah.
Steven's grandfather later told the investigators that Steven had hand grenades and had been making and detonating pipe bombs.
I think it's concerning that you have hand grenades and that you're making pipe bombs.
I think both are very concerning. If you own a pistol or a rifle or both, and you like to go out and do some target shooting, is there anything wrong with that? No, not in my mind whatsoever. I don't know why anyone would really need a hand grenade. Is it even legal to own a hand grenade? I don't know.
I don't think so.
And what are the uses for a pipe bomb? Legitimate uses.
Well, that creek down there is, damming up, and we got to break that free.
We got to change the water flow
Yeah.
of this creek. But I can just imagine this kid kind of, keeping these things, making them and keeping them in his room. It was said that he often did target practice with his M1 and other guns, but one of his targets was a human dummy.
Oh, he didn't have the beer can out there that you would shoot on a string.
Or even a paper target.
Yeah.
Which is, what I'm kind of used to, or a cardboard target. He used a human dummy. But, basically what all this practice did was turn him into a skilled marksman. And that's what practice will do, right? And it's not just shooting. If you practice anything enough, you'll get good at it.
Yeah, I could hit something downfield 400 yards with a 15-degree wind 60% of the time, all the time.
The fact that none of that made any sense leads me to believe that you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Oh, no, come on. Well, let's not debate it.
Stephen later testified before a grand jury that he used a machete to trim trees and another knife to bale hay. He kept professional handcuffs, quote, just for playing around, and did target practice when he didn't have anything else to do. Stephen testified that he enjoyed hunting, but never got his license. He said he took a gun with him whenever he left home.
Well, look, the handcuffs, I've seen a set laying around here. I don't ask questions. I just assume, what happens after I leave here is none of my business.
That's a good assumption. Now, we are in Texas. I don't know how many people carry guns in Texas, but I'm thinking that by percentage, it's higher than many other states.
I would agree.
And you think about Texas, somebody driving a truck, they got a rifle in the back of the truck hanging up there. I'm not saying everyone, it's just kind of what you think of.
Yeah, and I don't have an issue with the machete either. I mean, I use a machete a lot when I want to clear vegetation away. So it's actually a really good tool.
Do you have a lot of vegetation that needs to be cleared?
Not anymore.
In your apartment? Steven dropped out of high school in the 11th grade and moved to Texas to be with his dad. Steven's friend, Dale Van Darrowstein, said he wasn't getting along with his teacher and was having a hard time because of his attitude and the military clothes he wore. Teachers thought Steven was weird. And to me, if that's the case, I'm assuming other kids probably did as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. They had to.
But despite his obsession with weapons, Steven had no history of violence or problems with authorities. According to the Star Tribune, Steven said he only lost his temper once when he fired a shot into an empty family vehicle. And I thought this was a little strange because, normally the people that we talk about on TCAT more often than not have a pretty lengthy criminal history, run-ins with authorities. It seems like Steven didn't have any of that. In May 1983, when he was 18 years old, Steven returned to Minnesota from Texas, followed by James in July. James had saved up enough to start another dairy farm. According to the Star Tribune, he rented a farm near Hardwick, Minnesota in September. James had the land, but not the cows to get the farm up and running. He sought loans from at least 5 banks and 2 cattle dealers, but was denied credit by everyone he spoke to. This was because Rudolph Blythe, president of the Buffalo Ridge State Bank that had previously issued him a loan, informed the lenders about the bankruptcy. James was aware that Blythe was giving bad credit references.
Well, that's a problem, right? If you have a president of a bank telling all the other banks, hey, this guy is not creditworthy.
But was he wrong? I mean, he had defaulted on his loan.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not like this guy was out trying to smear him. I think he was giving factual information to other banks. Susan Blythe, Rudolph's wife and vice president of the bank, confirmed that Rudolph told prospective lenders about the bankruptcy when they asked for a credit reference. So it wasn't like he was just calling everyone in town and saying, hey, don't give this guy a loan.
No.
They obviously knew that there was a previous loan with Buffalo Ridge State Bank. So before they would give out a loan, they're going to call the bank. And what is he going to say? He defaulted on the loan. He declared bankruptcy.
It's not going to ruin his reputation by lying.
On September 28th, 1983, James made a final effort to get a loan from a cattle dealer, but was rejected. James then called Rudolph Blythe and pretended to be a buyer named Ron Anderson, who was interested in buying the abandoned Jenkins family farm in Ruthven, which was still in the bank's possession. He arranged to meet Blythe at the old farm at 10 a.m. on September 29th. On that day, Rudolph Blythe and loan officer Deems Thulin drove to the abandoned farm to meet the prospective buyer. Stephen and James were waiting to ambush them. Stephen later testified before a grand jury that his father told him, we were going to go there and rob Blythe and scare the hell out of him.
Because that's going to help you secure a loan?
Well, the other thing I thought was, man, this must have been a really small bank, that the president of the bank is actually going out to the farm to meet these people.
Yeah, not like having an agent represent them or, having just a salesperson at the bank take care of it.
Yeah, the president is just going to drive out there. Don't let allergy season slow you down. Get common allergy meds for as little as $15 with GoodRx. So you and your family, pets included, can stop allergy symptoms before they start. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Just search for your prescription on the website or the app, compare prices, and get a free coupon to show your pharmacist. Save at over 70,000 local pharmacies nationwide, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Publix, Kroger, and many more. Check GoodRx before every trip to the pharmacy to save up to 80% on both brand and generic medications. And did you know GoodRx rewards you for saving money too? Join GoodRx Rewards today and earn points every time you use a coupon. Remember, GoodRx is not insurance, but works whether you have insurance or not. And it could be your insurance copay price. I've been using GoodRx for years, and I can't tell you how many times I have saved money even with my insurance. Stop allergies before they start and save big on allergy medications this season with GoodRx. Go to goodrx.com/TCAT. That's goodrx.com/TCATT. Once the temps start rising, I realized I was back in the same worn out rotation. Same tank, same shorts, same everything. So I gave my daily uniform an upgrade with Quince. Their pieces are easy, elevated, and somehow make me feel more put together without even trying. Like they're 100% European linen shorts and dresses from $30. Luxe swimwear, Italian leather platform sandals, and so much more. The best part, everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I'm getting ready to stock up on shorts for summer from Quince, and I know they're going to be amazing because everything I've ordered has been of the highest quality, and the prices are amazing. Treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/TCAT for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/TCATT to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/TCAT. Stephen drove them to the farm early on September 29th. They took 4 guns with them, including Stephen's M1 carbine rifle, which was later identified as the murder weapon, ammunition, 2 knives, 3 diffused hand grenades, and other military equipment that belonged to Stephen.
Let's scare the hell out of them, but bring all this with us. That's going to do it, right? I mean, wouldn't you be kind of scared? You see somebody having all these guns set up around you and some
hand grenades,
that you do not know that have been diffused,
and other military equipment, whatever that might be. So they got to the farm around 8:30 a.m. and parked in front of the garage. James took off their truck's front license plate. Steven put one gun on the seat and two guns within reach on the hood of the truck. While James was removing the rear license plate, they heard a car coming up the driveway. This was unexpected because they still had a while before the appointment. They each grabbed a gun and hid. Steven said he hid behind the garage, but he didn't see where his dad hid. Rudolph Blythe's station wagon parked in front of James's truck. Blythe and Thulin got out of the car and began looking around, calling out, "Who is here?" Minutes later, Susan Blythe arrived at the property to switch cars with Rudolph. Rudolph told her he thought the truck belonged to the Jenkins family. And my thought is, right then and there, he had to have been concerned.
Sure.
He thinks he's selling this Jenkins farm to a third party named Ron Anderson. But when he pulls up, he sees what he believes to be the Jenkins truck.
Why are they here?
And how could anything good come from it? Susan stayed for a few minutes to speak to Thulin. She watched Rudolph walk past the vehicles along the side of the garage towards a grove of trees. He didn't see anyone and returned to the vehicles. While he was looking around, Susan said she heard a metallic creaking kind of sound. This was later identified as the sound of someone stepping on old rain gutters that were piled in the weeds behind the chicken coop. Rudolph told Susan to go call the sheriff because there were trespassers on the property. As she drove away, she saw Rudolph in the grove area and Dean Thulin looking around near the station wagon. So this is the early 80s.
Yeah.
Susan can't just whip out a cell phone. None of them can whip out a cell phone and call the authorities. She's got to drive somewhere.
Find a payphone or...
Yeah, most likely a payphone. Steven testified that he remained hidden behind the garage and didn't see his dad or the victims until after the shootings. He heard someone say something about going to get the police and saw one car leaving. And no doubt this is going to be important, right? This case is going to come down to, who did the shooting? Was it Steven? Was it his dad? Well, Steven is saying, I was hiding behind the garage. I didn't see anyone until after the shootings. Almost immediately after Susan drove away, someone fired 3 shots at the station wagon. Thulin was killed almost instantly by a shot to the throat. Blythe was shot in the back. He ran towards the front yard of the farmhouse and was pursued by the killer. He was shot 4 times as he tried to get to the road and died within minutes. A shot to the throat.
Precise.
It's rough. I think the one thing that you can say is these weren't accidental.
No. Definitely targeted.
Targeted. The killers meant business. They meant to kill because they shot Blythe, but he was able to run. Someone tracked him down and shot him 4 more times to make sure that he died. Steven and James fled in their truck. A witness named Paul Bartz was driving past the farm around 9 a.m. So not Paul Blart, the mall cop. This is Paul Bartz. He turned his truck around to investigate a yellow object in a ditch, which was Blythe's jacket. He then saw a white Chevy truck with a rear Texas plate, according to him, screaming down the driveway. So the sheriff's office received 2 calls at the same time. One from Sue Blythe and one from Paul Bartz, who reported seeing a man in a ditch in front of the old Jenkins farm. The police arrived and found Rudolph's body in the ditch. Dean Thulin was hanging out of the car door with a gunshot wound to the throat.
Not a way to start the morning.
No, I can't imagine anyone at the sheriff's office thought this was going to be their day when they woke up that morning. I'm also assuming that, for the most part, it was a fairly quiet area.
Yeah.
As far as crimes go. And I can't imagine that there were a ton of homicides. I have no idea what the homicide rate was, but you would think in a rural area like that, it would probably be pretty low. Steven and James decided to go back to their farm in Hardwick. On the way home, they encountered Rock County Deputy Sheriff Ronald McClure. Deputy Sheriff McClure was driving to an accident scene when he received a message to look for a white truck with a Texas license plate. He saw the truck and began following it. James told Steven to get out of the truck and shoot the officer. They turned onto a gravel road where Steven got out with his M1 rifle and shot 3 times at the police car as it passed the intersection. McClure laid down in his seat and hit the gas. He was not shot. So I think some pretty quick thinking on his part.
For sure, yeah.
McClure radioed for air and ground support, but the truck was gone by the time help arrived. About 15 minutes later, James and Steven were seen purchasing 100 rounds of .30 caliber ammo from a store in Laverne. They told the clerk they were going hunting, but the New York Times reported that these shells are illegal for hunting. They purchased .410 shotgun ammo and a flashlight at another store. James paid for both purchases with checks in his name.
So they're stocking up.
Well, and people might question 100 rounds. That doesn't seem like a lot. And, some people might say that seems like a ton, but 100 rounds of .30 cal, probably pretty expensive. I know it is today. It would have been more expensive than, let's say, pistol ammo.
Yeah,
for sure. Sheriff's officers visited James's parents' home that evening and found spent .30 caliber carbine casings that matched those at the crime scene. Steven and James drove to South Dakota, where they stole license plates for their truck. They drove through the night to avoid the police. So, let's just recap here. These guys are in a world of trouble. I mean, 2 men are dead. They shot and tried to kill, and now they're on the run. And like you said, they've stocked up. So what does that mean? That they're going to be ready for another shootout if confronted?
I think they're prepping for it.
Steven and James arrived in Paducah, Texas on October 1st. They went to an abandoned shed about 5 miles north of town. And they talked about what they should do because they had no money, they had no gas. On October 2nd, Steven left his father at the abandoned farm and surrendered to the local police, telling them he was wanted in connection with murders in Minnesota. Okay. Pretty interesting and not something that we see a lot of the time.
No.
But we're also not talking about, a hardened career criminal, a serial killer. We're talking about a young man who, by all accounts, really didn't have run-ins with the law. And by his own account, wasn't involved in the shootings at the farmhouse. Now, he did admit to firing 3 shots at this sheriff.
Right.
Or the deputy sheriff. But according to him, he didn't kill those 2 people. But he said that he turned himself in because he was tired of running. But James told him that he was not going to give himself up. Around 6:30 p.m., Steven led officers back to the farm because his father had talked about ending his life. They found James's body in the middle of the dirt road leading to the shed with a shotgun beside him. He had shot himself in the head that evening. Inside James's truck, they found 4 guns, a makeshift silencer, a machete, 2 unarmed grenades, throwing stars, and 400 rounds of ammo.
Throwing stars?
Yeah, that's something you don't hear every day.
You do not.
But throwing stars were pretty big back when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I always wanted some.
Just to toss them around?
Yeah, I'm sure I would have thrown my eye out.
Probably would have.
But I never ended up getting any. Probably it's a good thing.
But 400 rounds of ammo they found. It's a
healthy amount.
Yeah.
Especially if a lot of that is .30 caliber rifle ammo. During a search of the Jenkins farm, deputies found another rifle, ammo, a formula for making nitroglycerin, and books on how to make bombs.
Okay. That could be pretty explosive.
That could be. We've already said, Steven had made some pipe bombs. Steven was quickly extradited to Minnesota. On October 28th, 1983, he was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and 4 counts of second-degree murder. And my first thought was that, Steven's in a really bad spot here for a number of reasons. First of all, he was involved in this whole thing.
Right.
Now, to what degree, that remains to be seen. The problem is his father's gone.
Yeah, his father left him hanging.
So who are they going to pin everything on? State versus Anderson specified the charges as first-degree murder of Rudolph Blythe, first-degree murder of Rudolph Blythe while committing or attempting to commit aggravated robbery, second-degree murder of Rudolph Blythe, second-degree murder of Deems Thulin, aiding, advising, and conspiring with another to cause the death of Rudolph Blythe, and aiding, advising, or conspiring with another to cause the death of Deems Thulin. All right, there's a lot there that all revolves around the murder of 2 people.
Some very serious charges.
Yeah, very serious. What I thought was interesting was that it was first-degree murder and second-degree murder as it pertained to Rudolph Blythe, but only second-degree murder when it came to Deems Thulin. And I thought that was strange.
Yeah, I wonder if they feel like he was more involved in Rudolph's murder
Than Thulin's?
Yeah.
Steven's defense attorney was a man named Alan Swin Anderson, who was described as controversial, loud, and profane. 3 things that you've been called many, many times.
Just today.
Anderson took the case pro bono and tried to earn money for a psychological examination by selling the story to a screenplay writer. Steven lived with his lawyer during the trial and was adopted by Anderson in 1984.
Okay, it's a little strange.
It is very strange. I get it. Sometimes these attorneys take cases pro bono, but I think anytime you have an attorney who is involved in trying to sell the rights of a client's story, it doesn't ever seem to end well.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to profit off of what happened and the potential outcome of the trial.
And then he ends up adopting this guy.
But why would you have to adopt somebody that's already legally an adult?
Yeah, he was 18 years old when this all happened. So, that seems a little strange. Anderson filed documents stating that he would show Steven was under the psychological control of his father and feared death if he disobeyed. Anderson alleged that James was prone to fits of violent anger. So I think he's laying out his defense right there, right? Steven was there. He participated in some of it, but he did so against his will because he thought if he didn't, his father would kill him. Steven confessed before the grand jury. He testified that he and his father were going to rob and scare Rudolph Blythe and did not discuss the plan on the way to their old farm. Steven's testimony was made public in December 1983, as well as a psychiatrist report. The report stated that James threatened to kill Steven if he chose to live with his mother after the divorce. Steven believed it was his mission to reunite his family, and he could only do this by spending time with both parents. The psychiatrist described Steven as a courteous, clean perfectionist, moral, emotionally over-controlled individual who had a neurotic dedication to his father. He also said Steven was conned, castigated, castrated emotionally, and coerced into this very sick relationship.
So it sounds like his dad was good at manipulating him.
Yeah. It also sounds like this psychiatrist likes to use a lot of words that start with the letter C.
Yeah, I noticed that.
As we detailed earlier in the episode, Steven testified that his father told him to take the guns out while he removed the truck's license plates. A car approached the property, and James told him to hide. Steven hid behind the garage where he couldn't see his dad. He said he heard voices. Someone asked who's there. Another car arrived about 3 to 5 minutes later, and one car left the property. Someone came near the garage and asked if anyone was there. Steven heard gunshots about 20 seconds later. Someone yelled, "He's got a gun," and then there were more shots. Steven came out from behind the garage and saw a station wagon. A man was slumped out of the passenger door. James yelled at him to get in the truck and start driving. Steven testified that James told him to shoot the police officer when they were being followed.
So it sounds like he's definitely making sure that they know his dad did all the shooting up until the police officer, deputy.
His dad did the killing.
The killing.
For sure. And he didn't even, according to him, take a shot at the 2 men at the farmhouse. Now, he did admit to shooting at the deputy. He also said that as he and his father drove to Texas, James talked about robbing liquor stores and gas stations and killing Darlene's new boyfriend. Steven testified he talked his dad out of the killings. I'm getting a real No Country for Old Men vibe here. You know, that guy with the air canister.
Oh, yeah.
Going into gas stations and flipping coins and stuff like that.
Today could be your lucky day or not. Depending on that coin laying it, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's exactly how he said it, but something like that. On January 6, 1984, an alleged suicide note written by James Jenkins was found on the Paducah farm where he ended his life. A Minneapolis handwriting expert determined the note was authentic because the signature matched a check written by James. The note was published by the Austin Daily Herald. It read, "I killed Rudy Blythe, the SOB, Steve leaving, won't listen anymore. A guy just as well be dead."
So it sounds like he took responsibility for at least one of the murders and was sharing his frustration that his kid didn't want anything to do with him anymore.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Now, he doesn't mention Deems Thulin, though, at all. Darlene's partner, Louis Taverne, found the note in a fuse box on the property. One local sheriff believed the note was planted. On March 14th, 1984, a judge ruled that Steven's psychiatric report was not admissible at trial. Prosecutors wanted the report suppressed because the conclusions were based on full acceptance of Steven's story, and the psychiatrist relied on statements from Steven, his mom, her boyfriend, and his grandparents. And that's not unusual, right? The prosecution always wants something suppressed that doesn't support their argument or their theory, and the defense is the same way.
Yeah.
Prosecutors also filed documents with witness statements claiming that Steven talked about blowing someone's head off, according to the Star Tribune.
Well, it's not good to tell somebody you want to blow somebody's head off, and then after that, someone's been shot in the throat and somebody else has been shot in the back and then shot 4 more times. Doesn't look good.
No, and the prosecution is playing that up, right? You know, here's a guy who was obsessed with guns. He talked about blowing someone's head off. He was at the scene of this double murder, so he most likely had, something to do with it. Even the smallest step forward can make a big difference in your financial future. When you open a Chime checking account, you're one step closer to a better financial future with no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Making progress has never been easier. I think we've all been in that position where we've had an overdraft. Well, with Chime, you can overdraft up to $200 with no fees. That's amazing. And they have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. Make progress towards a better financial future with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/TCAT. That's chime.com/TCATT. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A., members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs. MyPay eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee applies to get funds instantly. Crime checking account required. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. True Crime All the Time is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know, folks, therapy can feel like a big investment, but let's think about the state of your mind. It's just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save, on average, up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and time. And you get quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. I've used the BetterHelp service for years, and I love the fact that, I can connect with a therapist in a comfortable spot in my home on my laptop. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/TCAT today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TCATT. Deborah Lynn Placker, Steven's girlfriend in Brownwood, Texas, said Steven told her his mother died and 2 businessmen were responsible. Steven said they destroyed his life and he was going back to Minnesota to bomb them. Okay, if true, that's a little more damning than the other statement because it's specific to 2 businessmen. Now, it doesn't say bankers, but you can kind of draw the parallel there. At the time, Deborah had taken in a girl who ran away from home. The girl's mother called the police and tried to make trouble for her. Steven made 2 bombs that he planned to drop in the woman's gas tank to get revenge.
So he's got a bad side to him.
Yeah, would you say maybe he's got a little frog demon?
Oh, yeah.
There.
He does.
Somewhere. But he had no real criminal history. So is this a guy who, liked guns, was full of bravado and liked to talk, or was he really planning on doing these things? And that's a question that, a jury would have to answer. Because he didn't bomb this woman's car. We know he never blew anyone's head off. And he didn't bomb the 2 men in Minnesota.
I mean, Steven has definitely made statements. If you believe his girlfriend and others, he's not happy with what happened up there in Minnesota. It's impacted his life.
Yeah, but who would be happy, right, about, your family losing their farm? But to me, the jury's going to have it tough. They're going to have a tough decision to make because, how do you view these statements that are going to come into the record, right? He made some bombs. He said something about blowing a woman's car up. He talked about bombing these 2 guys. He talked about blowing someone's head off. But as far as we know, he never did any of that.
Yeah, it sounds like he talks about getting revenge, but they have no proof that he ever follows through.
Right. So how is the jury going to view his role in the shooting of these 2 people? And I think it's going to be, a real tough one for them. Steven's trial started on April 10th, 1984. Prosecutors argued that Steven was the shooter, not his father. Steven was described as an excellent marksman. James Jenkins had poor eyesight because of diabetes and was unfamiliar with Steven's M1. Thulin was shot from approximately 90 feet away, and Blythe was shot from 100 feet away. According to prosecutors, James could not have fired these shots with his poor eyesight.
Well, James got him the M1. And James had the veteran from the Vietnam War show Steven how to use it. So could you make the assumption that James was there and made himself familiar with the gun too?
Well, I don't know how familiar you have to be with the M1 to be able to shoot it. I don't think it's a very complicated gun to operate.
Especially if you shot other guns in the past.
Yes. Now, 90 feet away, 100 feet away with the rifle, it doesn't seem all that far to me. Now, I don't know what they mean by poor eyesight. Is it distance? Is it close up? Is it both? I don't know. Was he wearing glasses? Deputy Attorney General Tom Fable called Steven's story implausible and said Steven was as close as a man and a gun could be. Okay. You could take that a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Full Metal Jacket in the beginning when they get their rifles.
This is my gun.
They have to name them.
Yeah.
You know, that's as close as you can be, I guess, to a rifle. According to the San Angelo Standard Times, Fable said Steven and his father drove to the farm with the express intention to commit a violent crime. Steven Jenkins himself said so. And I don't know that that is untrue. I actually think that is true. The question is, who actually fired the shots?
And Steven saying, wasn't me.
Steven's defense admitted he was at the crime scene, but argued he was just obeying his father. Steven hid behind the garage during the shootings and later talked his father out of committing more murder. So, very easy, not all that complicated, right? The prosecution's argument and the defense's argument. According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, forensic pathologist Brad Randall testified that the bullet holes in the bodies did not show powder burns, which meant the shots were fired from more than 2 feet away.
Okay. I think they've already established that.
Yeah, they said 90, 100 feet. But I guess what he is saying is these were not close-up shots because the powder burns would have proved that. An agent from the State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension testified that 7 shell casings were recovered from the farm. 3 casings were found 86 feet from Thulin's body, and 4 casings were found 98 feet from Rudolph Blythe's body. So from that, I'm getting that's where they got the 90, 100 feet estimation, where the shell casings landed when they ejected from the rifle versus where the victims were shot. James Lansing, head of the firearms division of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, testified that the bullet fragment retrieved from Blythe's body came from Steven's M1 rifle. Additionally, a shell casing from a test firing matched shell casings found on the farm. So, I think that pretty conclusively says that, Blythe was killed with the M1 rifle.
Right.
It was Steven's rifle. It doesn't conclusively answer the question of who actually fired the rifle.
That's true.
Susan Blythe testified that her husband didn't see anyone when he checked out the property and walked behind the garage. The jury heard that just 3 days before the murders, Steven asked a man named Richard Hartson what kind of glass banks use and teller windows. He also asked what type of ammo would penetrate bulletproof glass.
Almost making it sound like they planned on going into the bank and shooting up the bank.
Or this would be later on when they were on the run, where they were going to rob bank. But I don't know. On April 20th, witness Ted Beard, who met James and Steven when they lived in Texas, testified that James could not see through the scope on a deer rifle. James needed a flashlight to see anything at night and walked as if he was using his feet to feel where he was going. This supported the prosecution's argument that James had poor eyesight and was unfamiliar with more complex guns.
This is talking about nighttime. This is during the day when these shootings happen. That's a big difference.
It is. I don't know, why that really came into play. And I also don't know that this gun had a scope on it. Now, this part about, him walking as if he was using his feet to feel where he was going. I mean, they're making him sound like Mr. Magoo.
Yeah.
Like he can't see anything in front of him. How is he driving the truck at one point?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Now, let me ask you this. If someone has this M1 and they just point it in the direction where they think the target is, meaning they see the target and they just point the barrel at that target and pull the trigger, it's possible they're going to hit that target.
Yeah, possible. But to me, not probable from 90, 100 feet away.
Yeah.
To hit, Thulin in the throat and Blythe in the back, I'm thinking you're going to need to be looking through the sights to make that happen. An ophthalmologist testified that James suffered from tunnel vision and night blindness, which is a degenerative eye disease. He examined James back in 1981. The doctor testified that his eyesight would have been as bad or worse by 1983. And I would say that's a given. Eyesight normally does not get better.
That's true.
As you and I both have experienced. In his opinion, James could have shot a running man from 100 feet away if he had experience with firearms. The doctor estimated that James could have seen up to 450 feet away with his glasses on. So again, I go back to the glasses. If you don't see that well, as a lot of people have trouble with their vision, well, normally you get glasses.
Yeah.
Well, obviously this guy had glasses. So doesn't that make a difference when you're talking about whether or not he could have looked through the sights, whether or not he could have, seen these people at 90, 100 feet away? To me, glasses on versus glasses off, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know if he was wearing them or not.
No, we don't. But I think the defense likes this testimony.
Oh, absolutely. However, he testified that it is difficult for a person with glasses to see along the barrel of an M1 without a scope. The M1 used in the shootings did not have a scope. But my thought is it had sights. It had iron sights, I would assume.
Couldn't you make the case that any rifle could be kind of difficult if you're wearing glasses because you can't get your face positioned the way you really want to, depending on the frames you have on?
Maybe. Yeah. And it depends on your vision, right? And what kind of glasses you have, I guess. An agent from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension testified about his interview with Darlene. After the murders, Darlene told the agent that James was not interested in target shooting. However, at trial, Darlene testified that James used to shoot at rats and their farm windmill a couple times a week.
Well, if you're target shooting and hitting moving rats, you've got some skill.
Yeah. But we're also getting a little bit of conflicting testimony. I don't know if she's changing her testimony. I think she's just saying he wasn't real interested in target shooting, but he did shoot rats and he shot guns and he had some experience. She testified, I'd say he was as good as I was and I wasn't a bad shot. She testified that herself, Steven, and James practiced shooting together and sometimes did target practice with the M1. They claimed they shot at cans from 300 feet away.
Well, now you've got testimony that saying he was familiar with the gun.
And 300 feet away, shooting a can is a heck of a lot harder than shooting the broadside of a man 90 feet away.
Right.
Darlene did not recall telling the agent that James didn't hunt or target shoot and said she couldn't remember making similar statements to a grand jury. Defense witnesses testified that they saw James climb up icy steps, operate a crane, and weld. So I think the defense is really trying to chip away at this notion put forth by the prosecution that James was so poor-sighted, he couldn't even hardly walk.
Right.
He had to use his feet to kind of gauge where he was going. And I thought that was a little strange as well. In closing arguments, defense attorney Alan Swin Anderson said James was the killer because he blamed the bank for his troubles. He noted that 3 shots were fired at Thulin, but he was hit once. 5 shots were fired at Blythe, and he was hit 4 times, which indicated an erratic pattern. The shots were likely fired by someone who had trouble seeing. So now the defense attorney is even using that or trying to use that to his advantage. Yeah. I think what he's saying is if my client was doing the shooting, he wouldn't have missed that many times.
But according to you, James has these vision problems. Maybe he did. That's why it took him so many shots to hit these individuals.
The jury rejected this argument, and on April 26, 1984, Steven Jenkins was convicted of the first-degree murder of Rudolph Blythe and the second-degree murder of Deems Thulin. On May 22nd, Steven was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 116 months, but he would be eligible for parole after 17 and a half years. Steven also pleaded guilty to second-degree assault. For shooting at the deputy sheriff, he was sentenced to 5 years of probation. And remember, that was the only thing he actually confessed to doing.
Yeah.
According to the Albert Lea Tribune, Alan Anderson spoke at the hearing and said, Steven was the victim of the most severe child abuse I have ever witnessed in my life. He described James as absolutely insane and said Steven would have been a straight A college student if he was raised normally. Prosecutor Tom Fable didn't make any sentencing recommendations and told the court 2 lives were senselessly and needlessly snuffed out in their primes in cold blood, and 2 families were destroyed. But on the other hand, we have a youthful defendant from a broken family and an unhappy childhood. So it's kind of interesting that the prosecutor even acknowledged that.
But he's right.
No, he is right. Earlier that month, Alan Anderson adopted Steven. Steven would change his last name from Jenkins to Anderson. Anderson told the UPI, I did it because I love him like my own son. It's important that he get an education and treatment so he can do something with his life. The boy has been a victim too long. The Minnesota Supreme Court upheld Steven's conviction. In December 1985, Alan Anderson died of a heart attack on February 2nd, 1986. He was only 49 years old.
Young.
In May of that year, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Steven's verdict and sentence without comment. After 17 years of maintaining his story, Steven confessed to the murders in a TV documentary that aired on September 11th, 2000. The timing was pretty convenient for him because he was up for parole the following year. But Steven wasn't granted parole until 2013, when he was 48 years old. He expressed remorse for the murders and told the Marshall Independent, I'm feeling very grateful for the opportunity to possibly return to society in a couple of years, but I can't forget the fact that I took 2 people's lives and destroyed 2 families. I have a debt that can never be repaid, but I do have a lot of remorse for the harm I caused. Steven said the murders felt justified for the first few years because he believed his father when he told him Blythe was the reason for their troubles. Steven continued in his interview, then I didn't want to think about it because I felt guilty. I murdered 2 men for the lies my dad told me. I had deprived 4 kids of their fathers and other people of their brothers, sons, and husbands, and I had not just deeply affected the families, but also colleagues and entire communities.
I believe what he's saying. I believe he felt this because he didn't have to say this.
No, but he could have owned up to it from the beginning.
He could have.
So when we talk about it being convenient because he's coming up for parole, then you have to question some things. What is he saying because he believes it's better for him as it relates to the parole board versus, did he lie back then, but now he's telling the truth?
Right.
And the jury got it right. Steven's mother, Darlene, told the Marshall Independent that Steven took the brunt of James's anger towards the bank after they got behind on mortgage payments. She said, Jim tried to control everybody in his life. He was a control freak. And if he couldn't control you like he couldn't control my life, then he just took it out on Steve. Steve just couldn't do anything right for him. So it does sound, and we didn't have a lot of the information, but it does sound like, he had a very rough childhood.
Yeah, sure sounded like it.
I don't know if we're talking physical abuse, but at the very least, we're talking some pretty serious emotional abuse at the hands of his father. It was former prosecutor Tom Fable who led a campaign to help Steven get parole. The two developed a friendship in 2009. Fable told the Marshall Independent, "The story of Steven Anderson, as far as I'm concerned, is an important one. It's one of redemption and retribution. He's transformed his life. And I feel good about the opportunity that Steven is going to be given because he deserves it." Steven Anderson was released from prison in May 2015. He will remain under supervision for the rest of his life. So as we wrap this one up, Gibbs, I didn't want to give it away too early that Steven ultimately admitted to the murders.
Right.
I still maintain that the jury had a pretty tough job based on, the evidence that was presented. I think both sides had a pretty compelling argument. So much was made of his dad's eyesight.
It really was.
About whether or not he could have made these shots and all of that. Was Steven telling the truth back then, or did he switch and start telling the truth when he admitted to the murders? It's a little bit tough to tell because I'm sure he could have thought that there was some benefit to him by admitting to the murders for which he was convicted, that it would play better in the eyes of the parole board. But it could also be that he was the murderer from the very beginning.
Yeah, maybe his defense attorney said, "Hey, listen, kid, you're probably going to be found guilty, but I think the best way to play this is let's go this route so that when it comes time to get your sentence, it won't be as bad as it could be if you just come out and say, hey, I raised my hand, I did it."
Right, because there were some mitigating factors. And again, the prosecutor even acknowledged them. The troubled childhood, the influence that, his dad had on him, so that, even if he was the shooter, as the prosecution alleged and the jury believed, even the prosecutor felt a little bit bad for him in some way.
Yeah.
And acknowledged that. And then years later led the campaign to help get this guy out.
That tells you something.
It does. It really does. And then the other thought I had was whether or not he was the shooter, he was going to be convicted of something.
Sure.
Related to murder. He was there. He was a part of it. I just think it's an interesting case when you don't really know for sure who fired the shots that killed these two individuals. It kind of comes down to whether you believe Steven early on or you believe that he lied early on and then started to tell the truth later on, like during that documentary.
Right.
And then there's the argument, would he have done this on his own, or was he being so controlled, or had he been so kind of indoctrinated by his father that the bank was bad? The bank was the reason for all of our troubles. It's the reason why your mom and I aren't together. It's the reason why we lost the farm. You plant that in somebody's mind for long enough, and does that become kind of the catalyst?
No, I think his dad did influence him. I think he was scared.
And use the word influence. Some people could even use the term brainwash.
Yeah.
But again, there are some unknowns in this case. And to me, that makes it even that much more, interesting. Because, one of the questions I have is, why did dad end his life? If the note was real, then he took credit for killing at least Blythe. He said, Steven is leaving me. I got nothing to live for. I don't remember exactly what the note said, and if he didn't write it, then who did? And why does his signature match?
Yeah. So did Steven lie about that? About, before the parole, did he not really kill Blythe? Or, you can chase another rabbit hole, right? Did his dad take his life, or
did Steven end it?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of different things that you can look at, you can debate. Again, all we have is, what came out of trial, what Steven has said, because obviously his dad wasn't around to say anything. But that's it for our episode on Steven Todd Jenkins. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Mike. Hi, Gibby. My name is Joseph. I am from Anderson, South Carolina. I've been listening to your podcast for, I want to say, about a year now, a year and a half. Found you guys when the Dahmer Netflix miniseries came out about 2 years ago or so. Been a listener and a supporter since then. I am homeless. I'm not on any substances. Never done any drugs, never drunk. I'm what you call straight edge. Sorry for the noise in the background. Children running around. But anyway, I was listening to the latest 2 episodes, the Alicia Rudd and the episode about the 2 oldest brothers killing their entire family. I don't know, that kind of put things into perspective for me. I'm, like I said, homeless, working at Applebee's, clocking at like 50 hours weekly. Unfortunately, pay is bi-weekly, so I'm still struggling. Just wanted to say thank you guys for at least giving me a little bit of normalcy. I listen to you guys on my daily walks to and from work, along with my many other true crime podcasts and professional wrestling podcasts. I just want to say again, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Well, thank you so much for calling in, leaving a voicemail. You know, Gibbs sounds like he's going through a rough time in his life.
Sure.
My thought is that he's working his ass off. He's clocking in 50 hours a week. He's going to get over that hurdle because he's working his rear end off.
Yeah, he'll get there.
So we're rooting for you, but I think you're on the right track. You know, hard work doesn't solve everything, but it sure helps.
It certainly does.
And so we'll be thinking about you. We'll be rooting for you. You've got our support.
And glad to be on those walks with you.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. It's Laura Verlinick. I just wanted to let you guys know I'm a team of both of y'all. Gibby, I have such a horrible memory. I don't even remember movies. And Mike, I was born in 1973, so all your stuff you talk about from your childhood, I totally remember. And I also want to say I'm probably your biggest fan. I've been listening to you from the very beginning. A few years ago, I had a tragedy happen, and I went into a coma for 3.5 months. I was in the hospital a total of 8 months. But after I woke up and saw my loved ones, my very next thought was, how many Mike and Gibbies have I missed? So it's good to have y'all. Love the true crime. I love the respect you give to the families and the victims. And just keep it going. I wish I had a suggestion, but I do not at this time. Love y'all.
Well, just the voicemail alone is amazing. And obviously she didn't say what she went through, but
Right.
to be in a coma for that long,
It's a long time.
it must have been something rough. To be in the hospital for 8 months, we're just so glad that it sounds like you're doing great and you're back up to hopefully full speed.
Yeah. Hoping for the best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. But I did get, a little bit of a kick out of, hey, obviously glad to see everybody. Now, how many,
Right.
Mike and Gibbies have I missed? That is something else.
Got some catching up to do.
Yeah. We had one thing in the mailbag. Tana Atkinson, great listener, great supporter, sent us each a really cool shirt.
Yeah. It was really cool.
Almost like a base shirt, which I can use down here in the studio because it gets cold. Somehow the warmer it is outside, the colder it is down here.
Sometimes you have to come to the surface.
No, I'm like a mole.
You are.
I like to burrow. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
And Gibby.
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
It was over 30 years ago that Clifford Olson first called me. Secret phone calls from Canada's most notorious serial killer.
I knew I was killing the children, but I couldn't stop myself.
Now it's time to unearth the tapes, because I believe there are still answers to be found. I'm Arlene Bynum from CBC's Uncover, Calls from a Killer. Available now.